Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts. Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Hey ho, hi, hey, hi ho, hey, how are we? How are you? I am peachy. And honestly, I don't have too much to report on the personal side of things since the last episode. Life has been good. Just been trucking along. Keep on trucking, brother. One thing I do have to report is I saw the movie Nosferatu in the theaters. The new Eggers movie. He's the same director or creator of movies like The Witch and The Lighthouse, which if you haven't seen those movies, definitely check them out. But Nosferatu was amazing. The tone of it, the dread of it, the score, the acting. It was seriously a 10 out of 10 experience. It's not that often that a movie really hits like that for me in terms of encapsulating an atmosphere and really driving it home and giving you an experience that's that, just like I said, dreadful. It just felt so dark and so evil in a good way. And it's honestly, it's a tragedy. So if you are not in that headspace to watch a movie that is just an onslaught of tragedy, it might not be the best time to go watch it. But if you can handle that right now, if you're in that headspace where you're like, I think I can handle that, it's a really, really good movie. Highly recommend. And if you can, go see it in the theaters. Don't wait for it to be streaming. I feel like the theater really enhanced it. Just the bigness of it, the intensity of it really was enhanced. The Nosferatu looked cool. The all of the sets, because it's a period piece, and it really felt like it was in that time frame. And Nosferatu's castle, his like mansion castle thing, was amazing. The creatures, even other than Nosferatu, were really cool. There's like these hellhounds, and then there's a whole rat plague, and go see it. Up here in Ohio, we have had more snow, and we had like a little blizzard the other day, and then now we had another 4 inches on top of that. So we've got a lot of snow and ice up here right now. I took Felix sledding, and he had a blast. Of course, he's 2.5. What little kid doesn't love sledding? I still love sledding. I remember that being such a big part of my youth in the winter. Is just like sledding, video games, sleep, repeat. That was the cycle. That was it. I also took Felix on a walk through the snow and ice yesterday, which I know it doesn't sound super exciting, but for a toddler, it was a real adventure because things would go from, we'd be in like powdery snow, and then it would shift into like frozen hunks of snow, and then it'd just be ice, and we kind of slip and slide around on it, and then we'd get some clear sidewalk. So it was a real textural adventure of different terrains. It was fun and intense. What else is going on? I've got a show coming up on the 31st in Dayton, Ohio at the Yellow Cab Tavern. If you can come out to that, would love to see you there. I've been working on music, actually, and some visual art. I shared some things over on my Patreon, which brings me to my next point. If you're a fan of the show, consider supporting over on Patreon. You get early access to episodes, early access to music and art and all that stuff, and I'm really ramping up the content over there. It's really big on my to-do list, so joining now gets you in on that experience, get you that great stuff early. But if that doesn't quite make sense for you, joining the Patreon, you can support by leaving a comment, a rating, or a review. That really does help out so much. So consider doing that if you can. So that pretty much covers what I've been doing. I'm not going to bore you with all of the mundane details of my life. Just parenting, making music, making art, doing some shows, going to the movies, reading, doing a bit of reading. But without further ado, let's get into today's topic. Let's get into why you're here. Quantum computing. And I promise not to go down an AI portal today. That's not what this episode is going to be about. So if you're worried that like, oh God, this is going to turn into a whole AI thing, it's not. It won't. I picked today's topic because I talk about the future of technology a lot. I talk about where we're headed as a species and how technology is bringing us to unknown, unfathomable places. And the research and development that is going on now with computer science and quantum computers is pretty mind-blowing. And also, don't worry, I promise that you won't need to know anything about how computers work to enjoy this episode. I don't want the title to intimidate anyone that doesn't really get into technology or doesn't really know anything about computers. I'm going to break everything down to very simple points so that it's very easy to understand for anyone at all levels of technological understanding. I mean, there's this is stuff that I don't even really understand is the thing. Like, we're going to get into stuff that I I understand the concept and kind of how it works, but it's still an emerging field of technology, and the people who are actually doing the real work, the scientists and the mathematicians, they don't really understand how it works. So we're going to talk about some of those theories and some of these technologies today. We've been using computers for thousands of years, and our computer usage started with the analog era. And think of this like counting things on sticks or bones or using rocks or an abacus, just more rudimentary devices that we use to keep track of basic things like how many chickens do you have or how many bags of grain does someone owe you, things like that. We did that for a really long time. And I've got this episode where I talk about this thing called the Antikythera mechanism. This is a shameless plug for that episode, which is called Lost Technologies. But essentially, the Antikythera mechanism was an analog computer that was found at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea that defies our understanding of how analog computers were developed. It's far more complex and sophisticated than any other piece of technology from over 2,000 years ago. It has historians stumped, and it's honestly this little mysterious, fascinating nugget. It's worth checking out. Okay, shameless plug over. Let's get back to the analog era of computers. That's how we started. It could have all, like your analog computer could have been a variety of things. It could have even been a tally on a piece of paper that could have qualified as an analog computer. Really any way to keep track of numbers and keep track of information. And eventually these analog methods got more and more complex. We started cataloging more and more complex systems of information in this way. And we did this for thousands and thousands of years. Eventually, this guy came along named Charles Babbage. And Charles Babbage created the ultimate analog computer. It was this huge machine with gears and levers and pulleys, and there was a crank that you would turn. And based on what you were trying to calculate, it could give you different potential outcomes. Like, you could set up the gears to align with past interest rates, and then you would turn this crank, and it would give you a prediction of future interest rates. Or, for instance, you could give it a series of coordinates, and it could calculate the longitude and latitude of those coordinates. It could do all sorts of stuff, but it was this big, clunky thing, but it was also a marvel of computational power for the time. It didn't use electricity, it just used good old-fashioned manpower. Like, you just turn this big thing, and it was heavy, and the gears would the gears would grind, and it would give you an output. So after the analog era of computers, we entered the digital era of computers, and this is where we start to see computers look more like they look today. I'm going to do another shameless plug here. If you listen to my last episode about the last 100 years of technology, then you've already heard me say this. War and defense drive technology. They always have, and they probably always will. So World War II breaks out, and the Germans have this super secret code that no one can decode. And Babbage's analog machine also can't decode it. The big clunky thing with the crank can't decode the machine, can't decode the secret code of the Germans, no matter how much input data they give it. It's like, I don't know, does not compute. So they gave the job to mathematicians. And there's this one mathematician that started making computers that could do it. And his name is Alan Turing. And he's also responsible for making computer code for not I don't want to say making computer code, but for codifying a lot of the laws of computation. He made the first modern model for computers by creating something called a Turing machine. And your laptop, your desktop, your phone, these are all Turing machines. They're very, very sophisticated Turing machines, but Turing machines nonetheless. They are built on the framework that he created. Him and some other people, his team created. And the Turing machine is digital. It greatly expands upon the analog concept, and it brought us into a new age of computing. So this is where we were as a species. We went from putting stones in a basket to count, to creating complex analog machines with gears and levers to calculate, to then using that framework to create digital computing machines. And this is where I feel like it's really important to explain how a digital computer works so that we can get into talking about how a quantum computer works. Digital computers are based on these things called transistors. So what is a transistor? It's actually pretty basic. A computer transistor is a microscopic switch that controls the flow of electricity in a computer chip. And transistors are made of semiconductors like silicon, hence why we have like Silicon Valley where all these tech people live. That's why it's called that. These transistors are a fundamental component of modern electronics. So how does a transistor work? Transistors are wired together in digital circuits. When voltage is applied to a transistor, it switches on or off, allowing or blocking the flow of electricity. And this on or off is why you always hear people talk about computers working in binary or speaking in binary, because the on or off is a 1 or a 0, on or off. That's why if you hear people like compute, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros. It really is just a bunch of on or off. That's what the transistor's doing. It's letting energy come through, or it's not letting energy come through. Essentially, that is the base. That is the framework. Those are the building blocks of modern digital computers. And in the computer world, these ones and zeros, these values, are called bits. Bits build everything you see on your screen. Think of it like building the pictures, the text, the software, everything. It's a little more complicated than that. I'm reducing how all of this works just to make it more understandable, make it more palatable. But essentially, bits build everything on your computer. And you might have heard of megabytes. Megabytes are really just a measurement of bits. 1 megabyte equals 8 times 10 to the 6th power bits. So 8 times 10 to the 6th power bits, that many bits equals 1 megabyte. So you're probably already beginning to understand this. The more transistors we have, the more bits we can have. The more bits we have, the more computational power we have. More bits equals a computer that can just do more. It can do more faster. So very simply put, more transistors means better computers, because we're getting more binary that can calculate and build more complex things. And I hope you're still with me so far. Those are the fundamentals of digital computing. Transistors make bits. We want more transistors because it gives us faster and more complex computers. So it stands to reason that we have been making transistors smaller and smaller and smaller so that we can fit more of them into devices, so that the devices can be more powerful. To give you a frame of reference here, a desktop computer from the 1960s would have had roughly 250 transistors in it. A current model iPhone has over 19 billion transistors in it. So let that just let that sink in. From the 60s, we went from 250 transistors to today, we've got 19 billion transistors. And that's because we've been able to do this by reducing the size of the transistors down to 3 nanometers. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of what a nanometer is, but for a frame of reference, a strand of human DNA is 2.5 nanometers. Our microchips are only 0.5 nanometers larger than that. So this is very, 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 very tiny. These transistors are so small. It's hard for us to comprehend really how small we've been able to make these transistors. So now we're really going to start getting into the nuts and bolts of quantum computing. And this is where the weird magical world of quantum mechanics will be coming into play. You set up enough transistors in complex ways, they can do insanely fast computing. And the smaller you make them, the more you can incorporate into a microchip or a computer system. And with how small these transistors have become, they start to get into this quantum level where the laws of physics act differently. And the laws of physics act differently on these tiny, tiny, tiny scales, not just for transistors, but with anything. The laws of physics start to get bent and broken once you get small enough. If you've ever seen the Marvel Ant-Man movies, you'll kind of understand this concept a little bit because they break it down pretty, honestly, it's like kind of accurate, but also kind of not accurate at the same time. But the fact that physics operates in a different way once you get so small is reflected in that movie, and it makes it easier to understand. So here's an example of how a transistor that is only a few atoms wide, so really, 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 really small transistor, this is an example of how it would bend the laws or break the laws of regular physics at that size. Let's say this transistor is interacting with a part of a microchip that usually would be a wall for it. It would be a place in the microchip where it says you're not allowed to pass voltage through this wall. There are physical constraints here. The energy can't just dematerialize and then reappear over here, and the transistors are in this stationary position. Well, when things work on this quantum scale, they literally can. They can pass through physical barriers. And this is something called quantum tunneling. Quantum tunneling is a quantum mechanical phenomenon in which an object, such as an electron or atom or very, very small transistor, can pass through a potential energy barrier. It's kind of like, think of it like teleportation. These transistors and their energy and the way they interact with each other, they're able to teleport from point A to point B because they are very small. And I know that sounds absolutely insane if you've never heard of quantum tunneling before, and it really kind of is. It's magic. Not only is quantum tunneling possible with these transistors, there are a bunch of other strange things that can happen on this quantum level. Superposition, quantum entanglement, and some other things, but we're going to get into those. We're going to get into some of those. And these strange occurrences that happen on the quantum level can be unpredictable. And that has been a hurdle for scientists and mathematicians working in the field of quantum computing. But they've also been able to kind of make lemonade out of lemons. They have found new and interesting ways to utilize this unpredictability and this magic nature of the quantum realm to their advantage. So we've already established that transistors are getting so small that they are teleporting. They are able to do quantum tunneling. I want to get into another thing that starts to happen when you get this tiny, when you go this small. So stick with me. I want to break down something called qubits. And I've already talked about bits. Bits are a binary, an electrical signal that is either a 1 or a 0, an on or an off. We already talked about that. The transistors are doing this. But this is another thing that happens when we go this small. When we go quantum enough, we see the emergence of these things called qubits. And I know I'm throwing a lot out here, and I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, but that's kind of the essence of this episode. So, like I said, stay with me. Qubits start to exist when we get really, 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 really tiny. They're smaller than germs, they're smaller than blood cells, they're smaller than single-celled organisms. We're talking about atomic level stuff. Qubits are like bits. They are a signal, a pulse that represents a number, just like bits do. The difference is that instead of being just a 1 or a 0, a qubit can actually be any value between 1 and 0, or it can be 1 and 0 simultaneously. So it can be these essentially infinite number of values between 1 and 0 and 1 and 0 all at the same time. And I know that's kind of confusing, but basically just think of qubits as a magical version of bits that can go beyond just binary. They can do 1, they can do 0, they can do everything in between, they can do it all at once. This phenomenon is called superposition. And this, like I said, this doesn't just exist with transistors and bits and qubits. This exists across the quantum universe altogether, but it's happening in quantum computers. This superposition is how we get into the real madness of quantum computing. And let me break it down just a little bit more. Let me break it down just a little qubit more. Hee hee. Let's say we have 4 bits, regular old bits, the classic bits. They each can be a 1 or a 0. We have an outcome of 16 possibilities. If we're just using 1 and 0 with 4 transistors, 16 outcomes that it can be, no matter what. That's what we're getting. So let's take the same concept and say we are working with 4 qubits instead. Each one of those qubits is in a superposition. Each individual one is able to be the 16 outcomes all at once. So, long story short, 4 qubits are generating way more potential outcomes than just 4 bits. And qubits also do this wild thing that works on this premise called quantum entanglement. And essentially, by looking at one of the qubits in a system, you can tell what other qubits are doing. And that's the very, very, very simplified version of this quantum entanglement. But basically, because the qubits are so small, they're functioning as, I'll just say, like a singular organism. It's not an organism, obviously, but I'm going to call it that. They're functioning as a unit. Think of it like if a doctor is doing surgery and they look at a patient's kidneys and the kidneys aren't looking good, they're looking bad. They can deduce that certain other organs are probably looking bad or behaving in specific ways because of that deduction. And that's kind of how this quantum entanglement works. Really, really small things get kind of glued together. And it's way more complicated than I'm making it, but this is the easiest way I can explain it. they're so small that they become entangled, hence the name quantum entanglement. And you can analyze more parts of the system by looking at just one part because they're sort of fused together. This is another thing with quantum computing that is this quantum entanglement. It is a big pro and it's also a big con. But let's get back to how these quantum computers are actually working. The qubits are doing computations that operate on a framework of superposition. They are not working on the binary. They're all shifting between 1 and 0, basically limitless options, so that would lead us to believe that their output calculations would also be superpositions as well. And yeah, that is true. They're giving these mass amounts of data that are all based on superpositions, but it's that very thing that gives the quantum computer its power. It can give you every potential outcome of an equation or a problem all at once. And I know that that sounds kind of like a mess, but scientists have figured out a way to exploit superpositions and quantum entanglement to get outcomes that they're looking for, or to get outcomes that make sense, to kind of like whittle down the outcomes that make sense. And this is the biggest part, like I said, of the hurdles that scientists and mathematicians are facing with this, because where they are faster than almost every computer on Earth, every computer operating just off traditional bits, there are these boundaries where they have to whittle down the chaos of superpositioning qubits. But these scientists and mathematicians are very close to doing that. They're very close to like taming this wild beast of a computer. They're getting there. And the quantum computers are currently faster than all computers when it comes to calculating things with multiple possibilities. But the unstable nature of working on a quantum level still has things that need to be smoothed out. It's all alive, it's electric, and it works more like an undulating organism than an actual series of transistors and microchips and an actual computer. It'll give some answers unfathomably accurately and fast, but there's still a lot more understanding that we need to do to be able to use quantum computing in a super practical way. Think of it like this new form of magic that is super, super powerful, but we just don't entirely understand how it works yet. We're able to tweak it and we're able to change it a little bit, but it is kind of doing its own thing and operating in its own way. It's kind of like having a flower and then trying to get it to photosynthesize in a different way, or trying to have it grow extra vines or extra limbs, or it's a lot like bioengineering, honestly, because of how fused these transistors are and how wiggly and jiggly and magical they are. They're operating like an organism, and it's a lot more complicated to work on that level than on a computational level. It's like this convergence of nature and technology. That's literally what we are witnessing and what is emerging right now. That is what quantum computing is. And it is honestly more intricate and complicated than that, or it's becoming that way. So let's talk a little bit, and I don't want to get too doom and gloom with this, but let's talk a little bit about the negatives of quantum computing. This is computing, like I said, that gives you essentially limitless outcomes, limitless varieties of answers. And this obviously is bad for cybersecurity, because every network and system we are working with now is typically encrypted. Think of an encrypted network as, we'll just say, for instance, you send a message. You say, "Yo, what's up?" that message gets encrypted as a string of weird symbols and code as it passes to the decryptor. It gets decrypted and reassembled by the other person's computer or phone, and those random symbols are rebuilt as, yo, what's up? But there's this in-between phase where it gets passed to, it either gets passed like through a wire or to a satellite or to a server, but the data is encrypted for security. And not to scare anyone or fearmonger or anything like that, but quantum computers could decrypt that message that you sent pretty much instantly. It's, they're a system of superpositioning qubits that could analyze the decryption of normal bits and predict exactly how they're going to come out at unimaginable speeds. So a lot of calculations that would take a normal computer years, like if a hacker was going to try to decrypt that message or messages on really complex encrypted networks, it would take their computers years to decrypt them. These quantum computers have the ability to essentially instantly decrypt encrypted things. They are infinitely faster than current digital computers. So cybersecurity is one issue that is going to need to be addressed as we move forward with quantum computing. Right now, and this again is not me fear-mongering or saying like, be afraid of other countries. Blah, 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 blah. I think technology is great, and I think quantum computing is great. Right now, China is like a decade ahead of us with quantum computing, and a bunch of money in the United States government is getting funneled toward quantum computing now, like billions, potentially trillions of dollars, definitely billions are going into quantum computing research because of defense and because of things like that, because it's now known quantum computers can get into your decrypted networks and they can decrypt things so easily. And our government's like, oh, we're behind. Oh God, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad. Like, we're so behind in the United States with research on quantum computing. So we'll see how that unfolds. That's going to be an interesting thing in the next decade to watch unfold. This next little problem we have is kind of a problem that we face with the actual quantum computers themselves, and actually being able to use them in a productive way that isn't like going to cost a ridiculous amount of money to just have and use one computer. There's this thing called decoherence. Everything in life is associated with waves. When waves are vibrating together, everything is peachy. Think electrons all rippling together as a fabric in a very coherent way. It's stable. It works. There isn't a lot of chaos going on. This is true outside of anything, even in the quantum computer world. We're all witnessing this fabric, all the substances, all the material around us. Every object is this collection of atoms that is all vibrating, and it's all waves. And when that cohesion is disrupted, that's where we get decoherence. That is a struggle with a quantum computing system, because quantum computing systems are so small that they are also a wave. They are also held together in this strange, magical, wave-like way. They're very delicate, and they can be disrupted very easily. Think of it like if you had a supercomputer and you just started shaking it. If there was like, you just reached out, grabbed it, shook it around, everything inside would go nuts. All the waves, all the stability of the system would start to go crazy. The transistors that are acting as waves, you're going to shake them up. All the information would get disrupted by the vibrations. the whole system of transistors would glitch and it would be bad. So to mitigate some of this potential wave disruption, quantum computers are super cooled. And all of the components of the computers, including the transistors, are moving very slowly. They're working in unison because they are super cooled. And that's just one of the hurdles that we're going to have to overcome with quantum computing that we're currently overcoming. But the hurdles we have to overcome to make quantum computers an actual part of everyday life and everyday research are far worth overcoming. Just in the medical field alone, we'd be able to simulate proteins that could change the way we understand medicine, viruses, and diseases. Because think of it like cancer, Parkinson's disease, just all diseases. Traditional computers aren't interfacing with them on a quantum level. And these diseases are working on a quantum scale. Quantum computers can interface with them. It's a whole new era of medical exploration that we are entering because of these quantum computers. Another cool place where these quantum computers are going to be a massive benefit is farming. Right now, there are scientists that are using quantum computers to make fertilizer for plants with raw nitrogen. And they're actually figuring it out right now. And when they do, this will revolutionize farming, and this will probably happen within our lifetimes. We're going to see cheaper food production, less waste, less byproducts, and all because of the sweet, sweet, sweet qubit. These qubits are going to feed more people. These qubits are going to cure more diseases. These qubits are going to do just unfathomable, wonderful things. They're going to change the way that we look at energy, the way that we look at transportation, the way that we look at education. It's really mind-bending that we are making machines that can calculate essentially limitless outcomes in the blink of an eye, and we are doing it right now. The human species is creating these machines as I speak, and we're using the fundamental functions of our reality and bending those functions to our will. It is literal magic. And I pretend to understand even a nugget of this, but the truth is, no one really understands how it works yet. At the end of the day, it's still a very strange, interesting field that is emerging. It's wonderful and exciting, and I love it. I just wanted to say one last little thing here. I had this epiphany while I was doing some of this research. And I already talked about how quantum computers have to be super cooled. The closer they're cooled to absolute zero, the more stable they are. Now, where could we take our supercomputers to have a constant environment nearing absolute zero? Deep space. And so, is deep space exploration going to fuel the advancements of quantum computers? And will this advancement of quantum computers in turn fuel the advancement of our spaceships and propulsion and space travel? Are they going to work in tandem? Like quantum computers already feel so sci-fi and high tech. It just makes sense that they'd be wrapped up in space travel together. At least I think so anyway. Anyway, let's get into a little segment on the show I like to call Let's Ask AI.
Let's ask AI.
And I asked a pretty simple question. I kept it on theme today. In the next decade, what advancements do you see in the field of quantum computing? And AI responded, in the near term, the next 3 to 5 years, I expect we will see continued improvements in qubit quality and coherence times, growing focus on error correction and fault tolerance, more practical demonstrations of quantum advantage in specific domains like chemistry, simulation, and optimization problems, increased commercial interest and investment particularly from major tech companies and specialized quantum startups. Looking further ahead, 5 to 10 years, key developments may include achievement of reliable error-corrected logical qubits, though likely still at relatively small scales. Every commercial applications in fields like drug discovery, material science, and financial modeling, integration of quantum and classical computing systems in hybrid approaches, potential breakthrough applications in cryptography and security, though widespread quantum supremacy for general computing tasks remains unlikely in this timeframe. So AI isn't super optimistic about quantum computing taking over, or not taking over, but like taking hold in fields of science and technology. And it sounds like they too lean more toward it's still super unstable, and we're just not going to have the know-how or wherewithal to harness this technology in a productive way in the next decade. But we'll see, AI. I feel like as a human, you might be wrong, because the mysteries that are unfolding in the quantum universe, I feel like we're going to get, not only are we going to get mysteries, we'll be simultaneously getting answers. We're working with superpositions that are going to give us answers, and it's just a matter of sifting through those answers and finding what works. I also wanted to say AI had a very interesting point about the fusion of, what did it say? Let me scroll back up here real quick. It said, I don't want to get this wrong. Oh, here we go. Integration of quantum and classical computing systems in hybrid approaches. So using bits with qubits. And they're kind of already doing that now, like using qubits to harness the power of, using bits to kind of harness and tame the power of qubits. So weird to be talking like this. It sounds like literal science fiction, but it's reality. And it's just blowing my mind. Let's get into the last segment of the show. This is just a series of fun facts. And this is all about computer history. This is just a handful of fun facts all about computers. The first computer virus was created in 1971 and was called Creeper. And it actually wasn't malicious at all. It just, if you got the virus, it displayed a message that said, "I'm the Creeper. Catch me if you can." I wish we had more sort of benign computer viruses these days. Something you can get that's just kind of like funny. There was one that happened, I think, back in like 2018 that I actually got on my old computer. And I don't know if anyone else got this, but it was the Google, I think it was called the Google redirect virus, where it just, anytime you tried to go to Google, it would redirect you to Yahoo, which was very annoying. It was super annoying, but I couldn't help but laugh at how just silly that was. Like, oh, you're trying to use Google? Sorry, dog. Yahoo. Like, so dumb. All right. Our next fun fact is that the first 1 gigabyte hard drive, the IBM 3380, was released in 1980, and it was about the size of a refrigerator and weighed over 500 pounds. That is a massive computer. All for 1 gig. They were rocking, but it's still, even still, 1 gig in 1980, not bad. That was a honking piece of machinery, though. Our next fun fact is the entire Apollo 11 mission that landed humans on the moon used a computer with less processing power than a modern calculator. It had just 64 kilobytes of memory and ran at 0.043 megahertz. And this is significantly slower than modern smartphones, which run at about 120 million times faster. Our next fun fact is that the first widely available and influential computer game was Space War. It was developed in 1962 by Steve Russell and his team at MIT. Space War was a 2-player game that simulated space combat on the PDP one computer, which was the size of a large car. And the game was inspired by the writings of sci-fi author E. Doc Smith. The game's source code was shared with other institutions, which helped it gain popularity. And this is our last fun fact of the day. And I'm going to be, I'll repeat this again so that if you want to check it out, you have the ability to. But the first web page created by Tim Berners-Lee in 1991 is still online. You can visit it at info.cern.ch. Again, that website is info.cern.ch. And I went there. It's super basic, but it's super cool that this very first website from 91 is still functioning. It's still there. And I'd like to see it continue to remain up for the duration of human existence. I think that'd be really fun. I said it before, and I'll say it again. I love technology. We've got a bright future ahead of us, and I'm excited to see where quantum computing takes us. It is literal magic. When you read about a magic system in a book or it's explained in a movie, this is exactly that. It's tapping into something behind the veil. It's communing with the gods. It's connecting with the essence of reality. Like I said at the top of the show, I've got a Patreon if you'd like to support. That link will be in the show's notes. Don't forget to leave those comments, ratings, and reviews as well. I'll see y'all next week, and until then, remember to check on your mental health, and remember to check on the mental health of your loved ones. Bye.
Thoughts. Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts. Analog thoughts.